Dr. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed down into the ancient ruins. The dead world of Keth 9 had no atmosphere, so he wore a heavy suit that made every movement difficult. But Marcus loved this work. He was an archaeologist who studied old alien civilizations. For 10 years he had worked for the Zephyrian Empire, digging up artifacts from worlds that died long ago. The Zephyrians ruled the galaxy now. They were tall, blue-skinned aliens with 4 arms and red eyes that glowed in the dark. 200 years ago they had conquered Earth and made humans their servants. They said humans were too primitive to rule themselves. Marcus had been born under their rule like all humans of his generation. Today Marcus worked alone in the ruins. His Zephyrian supervisor, Commander Veltar, waited in the ship above. Veltar cared only about finding valuable metals and technology. He thought studying old cultures was a waste of time. This gave Marcus freedom to explore on his own. The ruins on Keth 9 belonged to a race called the Precursors. Nobody knew much about them. They had built cities across the galaxy 50,000 years ago, then vanished. The Zephyrians said the Precursors were just another dead race with nothing important to teach anyone. Marcus descended deeper into what looked like a large building. His suit lights showed walls covered in strange symbols. He had learned to read some precursor writing over the years. These symbols talked about law and justice. Marcus realized he was inside some kind of courthouse. The main chamber was huge, with a raised platform at one end. Stone benches filled the room like a modern courtroom, but everything was covered in dust and broken rocks from ceiling cave-ins. Marcus began taking pictures and measurements. The Zephyrians wanted a full report on anything they could sell or use. As he worked, Marcus noticed something odd. One section of the wall behind the judge's platform looked different. The symbols there were deeper and more carefully carved. He brushed away the dust and found a hidden panel. When he pressed it, the panel slid aside with a soft hiss. Behind the panel was a small chamber. Inside sat a crystal about the size of a human head. It glowed with a soft blue light when Marcus touched it. This was a precursor data core. Marcus had seen a few before, but they were usually broken or empty. This one seemed perfect. Marcus carefully lifted the crystal. It was warm and hummed with energy. He placed it in his equipment scanner. The device beeped and showed that the crystal contained massive amounts of information, but the scanner could only read basic file types. To see what was really inside, Marcus would need better equipment back at his lab. He looked around the hidden chamber more carefully. The walls here had different symbols. These talked about the First Laws and the Great Council. Marcus had never seen these terms in precursor ruins before. Whatever this crystal contained, it seemed very important. Marcus heard his radio crackle. Commander Veltar was calling from the ship. "Human, how much longer will you waste time down there? We have 3 more sites to visit today." "Almost finished, Commander," Marcus replied. "I found some interesting metal samples." He lied easily. If Veltar knew about the crystal, he would take it and probably destroy it looking for valuable materials inside. Marcus packed the crystal carefully in his sample case, hiding it under some ordinary rocks. He took a few more pictures of the chamber, then sealed the hidden panel. When he climbed back to the surface, he acted bored and tired like always. On the ship, Veltar barely looked at Marcus's samples. "More worthless rocks," the Zephyrian said with disgust. "I do not know why the Empire wastes resources on this foolishness. Dead aliens have nothing to teach us." Marcus nodded and said nothing. He had learned long ago to keep quiet around Zephyrians. They did not like humans who talked too much or seemed too smart. But inside his heart raced with excitement. He could not wait to examine the crystal properly. 3 days later, Marcus was back at his lab on New Geneva Station. The station orbited a gas giant in human space, but Zephyrian soldiers guarded everything. Marcus shared his lab with 2 other human archaeologists, but they were away on other digs. He was alone. Marcus locked his lab door and activated privacy shields. Then he carefully removed the crystal from his sample case. Under proper lighting, he could see that it was not just one crystal, but hundreds of smaller ones fused together. Each small crystal probably held different information. He connected the data core to his main computer. The machine hummed and clicked as it tried to read the alien data format. Marcus had built special software over the years to translate precursor files. It was slow work, but gradually text began appearing on his screen. The first files were routine legal documents: court schedules, administrative notes, case summaries. But as Marcus dug deeper, he found something incredible. These were not just local laws for one planet. This crystal contained copies of galaxy-wide legal codes that governed all civilized species. Marcus read with growing amazement. 50,000 years ago, the galaxy had been ruled by a democratic council. Every intelligent species had representatives. They had created detailed laws to protect smaller civilizations from larger ones. No species could conquer another that had developed space travel on their own. One document made Marcus's hands shake as he read it. Article 847C of the Primordial Galactic Codex stated clearly, "No species may claim dominion over another sentient species that has achieved stellar travel independently." Humans had developed faster than light travel on their own, years before meeting any aliens. Under these ancient laws, the Zephyrian conquest of Earth was completely illegal. Marcus kept reading. The laws covered everything: trade agreements, territorial disputes, technology sharing, even rules for first contact with new species. The galaxy had once been organized and fair, with justice for everyone. But the most shocking discovery came in the final files. These were recent additions to the crystal, added just a few thousand years ago. They showed that the Zephyrians knew about these laws. They had found copies of the Galactic Codex early in their spacefaring history. But instead of following the laws, they had decided to hide them and rule through force instead. The Zephyrians had spent centuries destroying evidence of the old galactic democracy. They burned libraries, demolished ancient courthouses, and killed scholars who knew too much. They rewrote history to make themselves look like the natural rulers of the galaxy. Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. In his hands was proof that the entire Zephyrian Empire was built on lies. Every human who had died fighting for freedom, every species enslaved by the Empire, every injustice of the past 2 centuries, all of it was illegal under laws that still technically existed. But what could one human archaeologist do with this information? The Zephyrians controlled the military, the courts, the media. Who would believe him? And even if they did, who had the power to enforce 50,000-year-old laws? Marcus looked out his lab window at the stars. Somewhere out there were other species suffering under Zephyrian rule. The aquatic Hydrians forced to give up their ocean worlds for Zephyrian colonies. The crystalline Vortani, enslaved as living computers. The nomadic stellar wanderers banned from half the galaxy. Maybe alone Marcus could do nothing. But he was not alone. There were other humans who still believed in freedom. There were aliens who hated the Empire. And now, for the first time, they had something the Zephyrians did not expect them to have. They had the law on their side. Marcus began copying the files to secure storage devices. He would need help from people smarter than him, braver than him. But this crystal gave them something no rebellion had ever possessed before: legal proof that their cause was just. The Zephyrians had built their empire on the lie that might makes right. Marcus had just found the truth that could bring it all down. He smiled as he worked, thinking about how one small discovery in an ancient courthouse could change the fate of the entire galaxy. Tomorrow, he would begin reaching out to old friends. Carefully, quietly, he would start building a network. The Zephyrians thought they had destroyed all evidence of the old laws. They were wrong, and that mistake would cost them everything. Marcus spent 3 sleepless days studying the crystal files before he contacted anyone. He needed to be absolutely sure about what he had found. The Primordial Galactic Codex was real, and it made the Zephyrian Empire completely illegal. But Marcus was just one man with a secret that could get him killed. He decided to contact Dr. Sarah Kim first. Sarah was a human legal scholar who worked in the Zephyrian court system on Mars Colony. She had studied alien law for 20 years and knew more about Zephyrian legal codes than almost any human alive. If anyone could understand the importance of Marcus's discovery, it would be Sarah. Marcus sent her a simple message through their old university communication system. "Sarah, I found something interesting in my latest dig. Could we meet to discuss old law books, like we used to in graduate school?" It sounded innocent enough, but Sarah would understand that Marcus had found something important about ancient laws. 2 days later, Sarah arrived at New Geneva Station. She looked tired and worried. Working for the Zephyrians was hard on humans. They were always watched, always suspected of disloyalty. Sarah had to be careful about everything she said and did. Marcus met her at a small cafe in the civilian section of the station. They talked about normal things while they ate: weather, family, work. But Marcus slipped her a data chip hidden inside a salt shaker. Sarah palmed it smoothly. Years of living under Zephyrian rule had made all humans good at secret communication. That evening, Sarah came to Marcus's lab. She had reviewed the files on the data chip and her face was pale with shock. "Marcus, do you understand what you have here?" she whispered. "This is proof that every Zephyrian law, every court decision, every conquest for the past 1,000 years is completely invalid." "I know," Marcus said. "But what can we do about it? We're just two humans. The Zephyrians control everything." Sarah paced around the lab, her mind racing. "The beauty of this is that the Zephyrians claim to follow the rule of law. Their whole system is based on legal authority, not just military force. If we can prove their legal authority is fake, their own system will turn against them." She sat down at Marcus's computer and began pulling up Zephyrian legal databases. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. "Every major Zephyrian law refers back to something called the ancient precedents, or the founding legal principles. They claim these ancient laws gave them the right to rule other species." Marcus looked over her shoulder as she searched through legal documents. "They're talking about the Galactic Codex, aren't they? But they're lying about what it says." "Exactly," Sarah said. "They've been telling everyone that the ancient laws said strong species should rule weak ones. But your crystal proves the opposite. The real laws protected smaller species from larger ones." Sarah found more evidence as she dug deeper into the legal databases. The Zephyrians had referenced the Primordial Codex in hundreds of court cases over the centuries. They always claimed it supported their position, but they never showed the actual text to anyone. They said the original documents were lost to antiquity. "This is huge," Sarah said. "But we need more than just the legal proof. We need allies, and we need a way to spread this information without getting caught." Marcus nodded. "I know someone who might help. Jake Morrison runs a small resistance cell here on the station. He's been fighting the Zephyrians for years, but he's always lacked a real legal justification for rebellion." The next day, Marcus and Sarah met Jake Morrison in the lower maintenance levels of the station. Jake was a former Earth military officer who had never accepted the Zephyrian conquest. He was tall and scarred, with the hard eyes of someone who had seen too much war. But when Marcus showed him the crystal files, Jake's expression changed to amazement. "You're telling me the Zephyrians have been lying about everything?" Jake asked. "Their whole legal system is fake?" "Not fake," Sarah corrected. "Based on real laws that they've been deliberately misinterpreting. The Primordial Codex is real, but it says the opposite of what the Zephyrians claim." Jake studied the documents on Marcus's portable screen. He was not a scholar, but he understood the implications. "This changes everything. For the first time, we're not just rebels fighting against authority. We're the legal authority fighting against criminals. But we need more evidence," Marcus said. "This crystal has a lot of information, but it's not complete. I need to find more precursor sites, more data cores, and we need to contact other species who are suffering under Zephyrian rule." Jake smiled grimly. "I can help with that. My resistance network has contacts with alien groups across the galaxy. The Hydrians have been fighting Zephyrian colonization of their water worlds. The Vortani are forced to work as slave computers in Zephyrian factories. The stellar wanderers have been banned from half their traditional migration routes. Over the next few weeks, the three humans began building a secret network." Marcus used his archaeological work as cover to visit more precursor sites. He found fragments of the Galactic Codex on 3 different worlds, each piece adding more evidence to their case. Sarah worked within the Zephyrian legal system, carefully documenting every case where the Empire had claimed to follow ancient law. She built a database showing how Zephyrian courts consistently lied about what the old laws actually said. Jake reached out to resistance fighters and oppressed aliens across the galaxy. He was careful to approach only people he trusted completely. The response was better than he had hoped. On the water world of Aquatica Prime, the Hydrian resistance leader Depth Singer Coral Dreams was amazed to learn about the Galactic Codex. "We always knew the Zephyrians were thieves and murderers," she said during a secret communication. "But you're telling us they're also violating their own laws? This could unite every oppressed species in the galaxy." The crystalline Vortani were even more excited. Their leader, Logic Pattern Diamond Shine, had access to vast computational power. "We can analyze these legal documents faster than any biological species," Diamond Shine promised. "Send us everything you have found. We will find connections and evidence that biological minds might miss." The stellar wanderers were nomads who traveled between stars in great generation ships. Their leader, Captain Voidwalker Starsinger, had ancient databases that might contain more references to the primordial codex. Our people have oral traditions going back thousands of years, Starsinger said. We remember when the galaxy was ruled by law instead of force. As the network grew, Marcus made an important discovery. The complete primordial galactic codex was not lost. According to references in the crystal files, the original document was hidden in the most secure location in the galaxy, the Imperial Archives on the Zephyrian capital world of Zephyros Prime. The Zephyrians kept the original codex? Sarah asked in disbelief. Why would they do that? Marcus had been thinking about this question for days. Because they needed to know what the real laws said so they could lie about them effectively. They've been using the codex as a reference guide for their deception. Jake pounded his fist on the table. Then we have to get it. If we can broadcast the complete original galactic codex to every world in the Empire, their whole system of control will collapse. It won't be easy, Sarah warned. The Imperial Archives are in the heart of Zephyrian space, protected by their entire military fleet. It's the most heavily guarded facility in the galaxy. But Marcus was already thinking about possibilities. His archaeological credentials might get him access to parts of the archives. The Zephyrians often asked him to identify old artifacts they had stolen from conquered worlds. I might be able to get inside, Marcus said slowly, but I would need help, and we would need a way to broadcast the information instantly to the entire galaxy before the Zephyrians could stop us. Jake smiled. Leave the technical side to me. My people have been building a secret communication network for years. If we can get the data, we can spread it everywhere at once. The Vortani offered their help too. We can break any Zephyrian computer security, Diamond Shine promised. And we can copy data faster than their systems can detect the intrusion. Sarah would have the most dangerous job. As a legal expert working inside the Zephyrian system, she would need to infiltrate the archives while Marcus provided distraction. It was incredibly risky, but the potential reward was worth any danger. If we succeed, Sarah said, we won't just be freeing humanity. We'll be restoring justice to the entire galaxy. Marcus looked at his friends and allies. A few weeks ago, he had been just one lonely archaeologist digging in ancient ruins. Now he was part of a growing rebellion that spanned dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. The Zephyrians had built their empire on lies and stolen law. But truth had a power of its own. And truth was what Marcus had found in that crystal. The next phase of their plan would be the most dangerous yet. They would have to infiltrate the heart of the Zephyrian Empire and steal back the laws that rightfully belong to all free beings in the galaxy. Getting to Zephyros Prime required careful planning. The Zephyrian capital world was at the center of their empire, surrounded by military fleets and defense stations. No ship could approach without proper authorization codes and a very good reason to be there. Marcus spent 2 months building his cover story. He told his Zephyrian supervisors that he wanted to study artifacts in the Imperial Archives for a research project on precursor technology. The Zephyrians were always interested in anything that might give them new weapons or tools. So they approved his request. Sarah would travel separately, using her legal credentials to access the archive's law section. She told the Zephyrian courts that she needed to research ancient precedents for a case involving territorial disputes. It was exactly the kind of boring legal work that Zephyrians expected from human scholars. Jake and his resistance network would create diversions across the Zephyros system while Marcus and Sarah worked. Nothing too obvious, just enough small incidents to keep Zephyrian security forces busy and distracted. The trip to Zephyros Prime took 3 weeks through hyperspace. Marcus traveled on a Zephyrian research vessel with 2 other archaeologists and a crew of bored Zephyrian soldiers. He spent the time studying building plans of the Imperial Archives and memorizing security procedures. Zephyros Prime was a massive world covered in gleaming cities. The Imperial Archives stood at the center of the capital, a pyramid-shaped building 3 kilometers tall. It contained the collected knowledge of every civilization the Zephyrians had conquered, along with their own historical records and legal documents. Marcus arrived first and checked into a hotel near the archives. 2 days later, Sarah arrived on a different ship and took a room in another part of the city. They did not contact each other directly. Instead, they used the communication network Jake had set up to coordinate their activities. On the morning of the operation, Marcus presented himself at the archives with his official research permits. The Zephyrian guards were polite but thorough. They scanned his equipment and escorted him to the artifact examination section on the 15th floor. The artifact section was vast, filled with treasures stolen from dozens of conquered worlds. Marcus had to force himself to concentrate on his cover story, instead of staring at the incredible collection. He requested access to several precursor items that the Zephyrians had classified as minor cultural artifacts. While Marcus examined pottery and sculptures, Sarah entered the legal section on the 32nd floor. Her credentials as a court researcher gave her access to historical law databases and archived documents. The Zephyrian librarians barely looked at her. Humans researching old laws was exactly what they expected to see. Sarah quickly found the section containing the most ancient legal documents. The primordial Galactic Codex was not openly displayed, but she found references to it in a restricted access catalog. The complete document was stored in a high-security vault 3 floors below. Jake's diversions began at noon. Small explosions damaged communication relays on 3 different space stations around Zephyros Prime. Computer viruses attacked traffic control systems at the main spaceport. Nothing that threatened lives, but enough to make security forces scramble to respond. While the Zephyrians dealt with these technical malfunctions, Sarah made her move. She had studied the archive's security systems for weeks and knew that the restricted vaults used biometric locks, keyed to senior librarians. But she also knew that the head librarian, an elderly Zephyrian named Scholar Thexfor, always took lunch at exactly 1:30 p.m. Sarah waited in a bathroom near the vault until Thexfor passed by on his way to lunch. She followed him to the elevator and struck up a conversation about ancient legal texts. When the elevator stopped at the vault level, Sarah convinced Thexfor to show her the legendary precursor legal documents that she had heard so much about. Thexfor was proud of the archive's collection and eager to impress a visiting scholar. He used his access codes to open the vault and led Sarah inside. The chamber contained thousands of ancient documents stored in climate-controlled cases. At the center, in a place of honor, sat the complete primordial Galactic Codex. "This is the most important legal document in galactic history," Thexfor said proudly. "It proves that the Zephyrian Empire has legal authority over all lesser species." Sarah nodded and smiled while she secretly activated the recording device hidden in her sleeve. "Could you show me the specific passages that establish Zephyrian authority?" she asked innocently. Thexfor opened the case and began reading from the codex. But as he read the actual text, his expression changed from pride to confusion. The document clearly stated that no species could rule another that had achieved space travel independently. It protected smaller civilizations from larger ones. It established democratic principles and equal representation. This is not what I was told it said," Thexfor whispered. "According to these words, our entire empire is illegal," Sarah finished quietly. "Every conquest, every subjugation, every law passed by Zephyrian courts for the past 1,000 years violates the very document you claim gives you authority." Thexfor stared at the codex in horror. He had spent his entire career believing that his people were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Learning that everything he believed was a lie shattered his worldview in an instant. Sarah felt sorry for the old librarian, but she had work to do. While Thexfor sat in shocked silence, she used a small device provided by the Vortani to scan every page of the codex. The scanner could record the complete document in minutes, storing it in a format that could be instantly transmitted across the galaxy. "What are you doing?" Thexfor asked weakly. "What should have been done centuries ago," Sarah replied. "I'm making sure the truth can never be hidden again." As Sarah worked, she found something even more shocking than the codex itself. Hidden behind the ancient document were modern files, recent reports and communications from the Zephyrian High Council. These files showed that the current Zephyrian leadership knew exactly what the codex really said. They had been deliberately lying about its contents for over 800 years. The files contained detailed plans for destroying evidence of the old galactic democracy. Lists of scholars who had been assassinated for knowing too much. Orders to burn libraries and demolish ancient courthouses. Even records of Zephyrian agents infiltrating other species' governments to prevent them from learning about their legal rights. The Zephyrian Empire was not just built on conquest and force. It was built on the systematic destruction of truth and justice. They had not simply ignored the law, they had waged war against the very concept of law itself. Sarah's hands shook as she scanned these files. The evidence was overwhelming. Not only was the Zephyrian Empire illegal, but its leaders were guilty of crimes against civilization itself. They had destroyed knowledge, murdered scholars, and enslaved entire species while knowing their actions violated every principle of galactic law. An alarm began ringing in the distance. Jake's diversions had been discovered, and security forces were searching for signs of a larger plot. Sarah knew she had minutes before guards would come to check the vaults. "Scholar Thexivore," she said urgently, "you can help me make this right. Your people have been lied to just as much as everyone else. The Zephyrian leaders are criminals who have betrayed their own citizens along with the rest of the galaxy." The old librarian looked at Sarah with tears in his large red eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "Help me get this information out," Sarah said. "Help me restore the truth that your leaders have hidden for so long." Thexivore stood slowly. He was old and had devoted his life to preserving knowledge. Learning that his own government had been destroying truth instead of protecting it was the ultimate betrayal. "The galaxy deserves to know," he said firmly. "I will help you." Together, Sarah and Thexivore finished copying the files. The old Zephyrian even knew about other hidden documents that proved the scope of his government's cover-up. By the time security forces reached the vault level, Sarah had transmitted everything to Jake's communication network. The guards found Sarah and Thexivore sitting quietly in the vault, surrounded by open cases of ancient documents. Sarah did not resist arrest. She had already accomplished her mission. The complete primordial galactic codex and evidence of the Zephyrian cover-up were now spreading to every corner of the galaxy. As the guards led her away, Sarah smiled. In a few hours, every species under Zephyrian rule would know the truth. The Empire's greatest secret was secret no longer. The law that the Zephyrians had hidden and lied about for centuries was about to be revealed to the entire galaxy. Marcus received word of Sarah's arrest as he was leaving the archives. His heart ached for his friend, but he knew she had succeeded. The data was already reaching resistance networks across dozens of worlds. Soon, every oppressed being in the galaxy would know that they had the law on their side. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on lies. Those lies were about to be exposed, and when they were, the Empire built upon them would crumble. Sarah had given the galaxy the greatest gift possible, the truth. And truth once revealed could never be hidden again. Within 6 hours of Sarah's transmission, the primordial galactic codex was spreading across the galaxy faster than the Zephyrians could stop it. Jake's resistance network had grown far beyond what anyone expected. What started as a small group of human rebels had become a galaxy-wide information system connecting dozens of oppressed species. The Vortani used their crystalline computational abilities to translate the codex into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. The stellar wanderers carried copies to remote star systems in their generation ships. The Hydrians broadcast the documents through underwater networks on every ocean world. Within days, every intelligent being in the galaxy had access to the truth about their legal rights. Marcus was still on Zephyros Prime when the first protests began. He watched from his hotel window as crowds of aliens gathered in the capital's central plaza. Most were Zephyrians, but there were also humans, Hydrians, Vortani, and representatives of dozens of other species. They carried copies of the codex and demanded explanations from their government. The Zephyrian authorities tried to suppress the broadcast, but it was too late. The information had spread too far and too fast. Government censors could block official news channels, but they could not stop billions of individuals from sharing the documents with each other. Marcus received coded messages from resistance cells across the galaxy. On Hydrian worlds, entire cities had declared independence from the Empire. The aquatic beings emerged from their deep ocean homes carrying ancient weapons and advanced biotechnology that they had hidden for centuries. They had never forgotten how to fight. They had simply been waiting for the right moment. The Vortani response was even more dramatic. The crystalline beings had been forced to work as living computers in Zephyrian factories and research facilities. But when they learned about the codex, they stopped working and began using their computational powers against their former masters. Zephyrian computer systems across the galaxy crashed as the Vortani turned their abilities toward sabotage and rebellion. The stellar wanderers abandoned their forced exile and returned to the trade routes that their people had used for thousands of years. Their massive ships appeared at strategic points throughout the galaxy, carrying not just refugees and rebels, but also ancient weapons and technologies that the Zephyrians had thought were lost forever. But the most shocking response came from within the Zephyrian military itself. Marcus watched news broadcasts in his hotel room as young Zephyrian soldiers laid down their weapons and joined the protests. Many had never known that their empire was built on lies. Learning the truth about the Codex shattered their faith in their own government. Commander Kelthar of the 7th Fleet was one of the first high-ranking Zephyrians to defect. In a broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy, she stood before her assembled troops and read from the primordial codex. "We were told we were bringing order and civilization to primitive species," she said. "But these laws prove that we are the primitives. We are the criminals. We are the ones who have violated every principle of civilized behavior." Thousands of Zephyrian soldiers followed Kelthar's example. They removed their insignia, abandoned their posts, and either joined the rebellion or simply went home. The Zephyrian military, once the most feared force in the galaxy, began falling apart as its own members refused to fight for a cause they now knew was unjust. Marcus knew he had to leave Zephyros Prime before the government declared martial law. But first he had one more mission. Sarah was being held in an imperial prison outside the capital. With the help of defecting Zephyrian soldiers, Marcus began planning a rescue operation. Jake's resistance network had grown far beyond anything the Zephyrians could control. What had started as a few small cells now included millions of beings from every corner of the galaxy. They had weapons, ships, communication systems, and most importantly, they had the moral authority that came from knowing they were fighting for justice instead of conquest. The rescue of Sarah took place during a massive demonstration in the capital. While hundreds of thousands of protesters demanded the dissolution of the Empire, Marcus and a team of rebels approached the prison. Half the guards had already abandoned their posts to join the protests. The others offered no resistance when faced with the legal documents that proved their government had no right to exist. Sarah emerged from her cell weak but determined. "Did it work?" she asked Marcus as they hurried toward their escape ship. "Better than we ever hoped," Marcus replied. "The whole galaxy is rising up. The Empire is collapsing from the inside out." As their ship lifted off from Zephyros Prime, Marcus and Sarah could see the planet burning below them. But these were not the fires of destruction. They were the flames of celebration. Entire cities were holding festivals as beings of all species came together to celebrate the end of centuries of oppression. The escaped prisoners made their way to a hidden base in the Outer Rim, where Jake had established a headquarters for the growing rebellion. But when they arrived, they found something unexpected. The base was no longer hidden. It was openly broadcasting to the entire galaxy, and representatives from dozens of species were arriving hourly to join what was now being called the Liberation Alliance. "It's not a rebellion anymore," Jake explained to Marcus and Sarah. "It's a restoration. We're not trying to overthrow the government. We're trying to restore the legal government that the Zephyrians destroyed centuries ago. The Alliance was using the primordial Galactic Codex as a blueprint for rebuilding galactic civilization. Representatives from every species were working together to create a new democratic council based on the ancient laws. The Hydrians contributed their expertise in biological sciences. The Vortani provided computational support. The Stellar Wanderers shared their knowledge of ancient technologies and trade routes. Even many Zephyrians joined the alliance. Beings like Scholar Thexvor and Commander Kelthar brought with them not just their knowledge and skills, but also evidence of other crimes committed by the Empire. They helped expose the full scope of the cover-up that had hidden the truth for so long. Marcus found himself at the center of something far larger than he had ever imagined. The quiet archaeologist who had just wanted to study old ruins was now one of the leaders of a galactic revolution. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to him for guidance, not because he was a politician or a general, but because he was the one who had discovered the truth that set them all free. But Marcus knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The old Zephyrian Empire was crumbling, but its leaders were not ready to surrender. Emperor Zarthak and his High Council still controlled significant military forces, and they would not give up power without a fight. Reports came in from across the galaxy of Zephyrian forces attacking rebel positions. Some loyal military units were trying to crush the uprising with violence. The Emperor had declared the Codex a fake and ordered all copies destroyed. He claimed that the rebellion was led by terrorists and criminals who wanted to destroy galactic civilization. Worked with legal experts from dozens of species to prepare formal charges against the Zephyrian leadership. Using the Empire's own legal system, they filed lawsuits in Zephyrian courts demanding that the government justify its authority under the laws it claimed to follow. The beauty of this approach, Sarah explained to the Alliance leadership, is that we're not asking them to accept new laws. We're asking them to follow their own laws. Every Zephyrian court, every legal decision, every government action for the past 1,000 years has claimed to be based on the primordial codex. Now we're just asking them to prove it. The legal challenge put the Zephyrian government in an impossible position. They could not produce evidence that the codex supported their authority, because it clearly did not. They could not claim the document was fake, because their own archives proved it was genuine. They could not ignore the legal challenges because their entire system was supposedly based on the rule of law. As the legal pressure mounted, more and more Zephyrian officials began to defect. Judges, administrators, even members of the High Council started abandoning the Empire to join the Alliance. They brought with them more evidence of the government's crimes and more proof of the systematic cover-up that had hidden the truth for centuries. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed invincible just months before, was now collapsing under the weight of its own lies. The truth that Marcus had discovered in an ancient ruin was spreading across the galaxy like an unstoppable force, sweeping away centuries of oppression and injustice. But Emperor Zarthak was not finished yet. In a desperate attempt to maintain power, he was preparing for one final gambit that would test whether the forces of law and justice were truly stronger than the forces of tyranny and violence. Emperor Zarthak stood before his remaining loyal forces on the throne world of Zephyros Prime. Half his military had defected to the Alliance, and rebel ships surrounded the planet. But the Emperor was not ready to surrender. He had ruled the galaxy for 60 years, and would not give up power without one final battle. The ancient laws are meaningless, Zarthak declared to his assembled generals and admirals. We rule because we are strong. We conquer because we can. These pathetic rebels hide behind old documents because they lack the courage to face us in honest combat. The Emperor's words were broadcast across the galaxy, but they had the opposite effect from what he intended. Instead of inspiring fear, they proved everything the Alliance had been saying. Zarthak was openly admitting that his empire was based on force rather than law, on might rather than right. Marcus watched the broadcast from the Alliance headquarters and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. The Emperor's speech had just confessed to every crime the Alliance had accused him of committing. He's telling the entire galaxy that he doesn't care about law or justice, Marcus said to Sarah and Jake. He's proving our point better than we ever could. Sarah was working with legal teams from dozens of species to prepare the final legal challenge to the Empire. They were not planning a military assault on Zephyros Prime. Instead, they were going to use the Empire's own court system to remove the Emperor from power. Every Zephyrian law requires that the ruler have legal authority based on ancient precedents, Sarah explained to the Alliance Council. The Emperor just admitted that he doesn't care about those precedents. Under Zephyrian law, that makes him a criminal who has no right to rule. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The Alliance would file formal legal challenges in every Zephyrian court in the galaxy simultaneously. They would demand that the Emperor prove his authority under the laws he claimed to follow. When he could not, because the Codex clearly proved he had no such authority, the courts would be legally required to remove him from power. It was a risky strategy. It depended on Zephyrian judges following their own laws even when those laws went against their government. But the Alliance had reason for hope. Many Zephyrian legal scholars and judges had already defected when they learned the truth about the Codex. Those who remained in the court system were under enormous pressure to prove they cared about justice rather than politics. The legal assault began on a day that would later be remembered as Liberation Day. In courts across the galaxy, Alliance lawyers presented their evidence. They showed the complete text of the primordial Galactic Codex. They presented proof that the Zephyrian government had been lying about its contents for centuries. They demanded that the courts rule on whether the empire had any legal right to exist. The emperor tried to stop the court proceedings by declaring martial law and suspending the legal system. But this backfired spectacularly. By openly abandoning the rule of law, Zarthak proved that his government was exactly the kind of tyranny that the Codex was designed to prevent. Judge after judge across the galaxy ruled in favor of the alliance. Some were Zephyrians who chose justice over loyalty to their own species. Others were members of subject races who had been forced to serve in Zephyrian courts but now had the legal authority to rule against their oppressors. The most important ruling came from the Supreme Imperial Court on Zephyros Prime itself. Chief Justice Vexnar, the highest legal authority in the Empire, had studied the evidence for days. She was an elderly Zephyrian who had devoted her life to the law, and she faced the most difficult decision of her career. Marcus, Sarah, and Jake watched the broadcast as Chief Justice Vexnar read her ruling to a packed courtroom. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, she said in a voice that carried across the galaxy, "This court finds that the primordial Galactic Codex is genuine and legally binding. Furthermore, this court finds that the current government of the Zephyrian Empire has violated these fundamental laws in every aspect of its rule." The courtroom was silent as Vexnar continued. Article 847C of the Codex clearly states that no species may claim dominion over another sentient species that has achieved stellar travel independently. The conquest and subjugation of humanity, along with dozens of other spacefaring species, constitutes a direct violation of galactic law. Marcus felt tears running down his face as he listened. The highest court in the Empire was officially ruling that the oppression of humanity was illegal. Furthermore, Vexnar said, the evidence shows that the current leadership has knowingly and deliberately violated these laws while claiming to uphold them. This constitutes fraud on a galactic scale and makes the current government criminal rather than legitimate. The Chief Justice looked directly into the camera, her words reaching every corner of the galaxy. Therefore, this court rules that Emperor Zarthak and his administration have no legal authority to govern any world or species. Their rule is hereby declared null and void under the laws they claim to follow. The courtroom erupted in cheers, but Vexnar was not finished. This court further orders the immediate release of all political prisoners, the withdrawal of all occupation forces from conquered worlds, and the restoration of independence to all species currently under Zephyrian rule. Emperor Zarthak's response was swift and desperate. He ordered his remaining loyal forces to arrest the Supreme Court and declare the ruling invalid. But when his soldiers reached the courthouse, they found it surrounded by thousands of Zephyrian civilians who were protecting the judges. Many of these civilians were Zephyrians who had learned the truth about their government and chosen justice over loyalty. The final blow came when Admiral Thekvar, commander of the Imperial fleet guarding Zephyros Prime, announced that his forces would not fire on their own civilians. "I swore an oath to protect the Zephyrian people and uphold the law," he said in a broadcast to his fleet. "The Supreme Court has ruled, and I will follow that ruling. Emperor Zarthak is no longer our legitimate ruler." One by one, the remaining Imperial forces laid down their weapons. Some joined the alliance, others simply went home to their families. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years was dissolving without a single major battle. Emperor Zarthak made one final desperate attempt to maintain power. He barricaded himself in the Imperial Palace with a few hundred loyal guards and declared that he would fight to the death rather than surrender. But even this gesture was futile. With no military support and no legal authority, he was just one old alien hiding in a building. Marcus found himself part of the delegation that entered the palace to accept the Emperor's surrender. It felt surreal to walk through the halls where so many decisions had been made that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. The palace was nearly empty. Most of the staff had already fled or joined the alliance. They found Zarthak in his throne room, sitting alone on a chair made from the bones of extinct creatures. The former emperor looked older than his years, defeated by the knowledge that his empire had crumbled not through military defeat, but through legal judgment. "You destroyed everything," Zarthak said bitterly to Marcus. 1,000 years of order and stability, gone because of one human with a piece of old rock. Marcus felt no anger toward the fallen emperor, only sadness. We didn't destroy anything, he replied quietly. We revealed the truth. Your empire destroyed itself when it chose lies over law, force over justice. The transition of power was remarkably peaceful. The Alliance had been preparing for this moment for months, and they moved quickly to establish a new government based on the principles of the Primordial Codex. Representatives from every species gathered on a neutral world to create the new Galactic Republic. The new government looked very different from the old empire. Instead of one species ruling all others, every sentient race had equal representation. Instead of laws designed to maintain the power of the strong, the new legal system protected the rights of all beings regardless of their species or military strength. Marcus was offered the position of first president of the Republic, but he declined. He was an archaeologist, not a politician. Instead, he accepted the role of Director of Historical Preservation, ensuring that the truth about the past would never again be hidden or destroyed. Sarah became the Republic's first Attorney General, leading the effort to create new laws based on the principles of the ancient codex. Jake founded the Galactic Defense Force, a military organization dedicated to protecting freedom rather than expanding empires. The transformation was not without challenges. Some former imperial worlds struggled with the transition to democracy. A few isolated groups of Zephyrian extremists continued to resist the new order, but these problems were minor compared to the centuries of oppression that had come before. Standing in his new office overlooking the capital of the Republic, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, he had been a lonely scholar digging in ancient ruins, ignored by his Zephyrian supervisors and resigned to humanity's permanent subjugation. Now he was helping to build a new civilization based on justice and equality. The crystal data core from Keth 9 sat on his desk, no longer a secret, but a symbol of hope displayed for all to see.